Kyle and Greg Stelzer join me this week to discuss year-round hop growing and wet hops. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 185. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 185, and it's early January 2018. This week, Kyle and Greg Stelzer join me from 24 Hour Hops to talk about growing hops and also wet hops. Thank you to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They have a new Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine podcast, which I encourage you to check out. It features some of the top craft brewery owners and brewmasters discussing brewing techniques and flavors in beer. It's the podcast for those who make and drink great beer. You can find it on iTunes or at beerandbrewing.com/podcasts. And also the Riptide Pump from Blickman Engineering. Designed for home brewers, this pump features a whisper quiet, sealed housing, a removable tri-clamp stainless steel head that's easy to clean, and a built-in relief valve for easy priming. It also has the integral Blickman linear valve for precise flow control. Get the Riptide Pump today, another great innovation from BlickmanEngineering.com. Again, that's BlickmanEngineering.com. And finally, BeerSmith 3 is available now for download on desktop and mobile platforms. It adds mead, wine, and cider support to the BeerSmith platform, along with new integrated water profile and mash pH tools for beer brewers. Dozens of new features, including cloud folders, updated databases, support for fruit, juice, and honey, as well as new Whirlpool hop options. Get your free 21-day trial today from BeerSmith.com and give it a try. And now let's jump into this week's episode. Today on the show, I welcome back Kyle and Greg Stelzer from 24 Hour Hops. Greg is founder of 24 Hour Hops in Arizona, and Kyle is co-founder and chief janitor. Their website is at 24hourhops.com. Greg, it's great to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Thanks. Doing well. Excited to be here and to have the discussion.
Coming to us from sunny Arizona, I believe. Yeah.
I am. So It's definitely one of the things we have is a lot of sun and a lot of heat.
And Kyle, great to have you on the show as well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Brad. Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. It's a beautiful day here in Virginia, Northern Virginia, although we're supposed to get a lot of rain. So, Greg, I understand you and your son have a rather unusual hop business, growing hops year-round in greenhouses, also in the the hop mecca of the world, which is Arizona. Unusual choices. How did you guys get into this business?
Yeah, right. I mean, how true is that? Nobody thinks of hops in Arizona together, especially when you have the Pacific Northwest, which has a lot of times people think of that as almost a rainforest. We're kind of the polar opposite. But Arizona does have some pretty good advantages for growing in a greenhouse. Like we talked a little bit on the introduction, we have a lot of sun, and plants like sun. So we also have very low humidity. And that low humidity allows us to grow pretty well because we can cool the greenhouse with swamp cooling, which is a big advantage. And we also don't have as much mold as you might in the rainy environments or the high humidity environments. So greenhouse in Arizona seemed like a pretty good offering for us.
Interesting. Are you a farmer by trade? How'd you get into hop growing?
Oh, actually, I got into hop growing by kind of a roundabout way. Basically, we were trying some wet hop beers, and what happened was we figured that you can only drink that, once a year, and we started looking into it. So then I started saying, that's pretty strange. I wonder why that is, and started getting into the hop plant and what it takes, and did some experiments in my garage, and then went down to the University of Arizona and did some of that. So do some more experiments with them, and finally just got into it kind of organically.
Interesting. So you just decided to start growing hops, huh? That's really cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
So Kyle, hops are usually dried really quickly to preserve them, but you guys actually specialize in wet hops, which are hops that are picked right off the vine and sent right to the brewer, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, we think, in our opinion, wet hop beers are amazing, and the aroma is always something that, to me, it was like it would hit my nose before the glass was even close to my face, and it would really preserve the hoppy smell and bring that from the plant to the drink. And so when we, like Greg mentioned, we thought that was awesome, and this is being recorded in December of 2018, and when I order a meal at a restaurant all year round, they use fresh ingredients. So why shouldn't or why can't my beers do the same thing? So that was it. That was the start. And if you would have told us 3 years ago that we'd be here now, we probably wouldn't have believed you. But it's been a lot of fun. So yeah, that's our niche, and we think it's a growing niche. This is something where it's all new, right? So no one's grown hops in a greenhouse and then harvested them off season yet. So we think that the perfect wet hop recipe hasn't been developed yet, because now for the first time brewers get a chance to take multiple bites at the apple instead of having to refine their recipe only once a year. And then we also are excited about, wet hops is a niche, but also wet hops for home brewers is a niche. Before, it was the big farms would have 10 or 20 pound minimums. And for the home brewers who are listening, they know that that's a lot of hops. And we specialize in small, we're dealing with small batch quantities. So, 4 ounces, and 4 ounces is our minimum. So we're also getting, it's an emerging brewing, it's a new brewing technique. And we're super excited because we get to, share it with the people who I think are some of the most enthusiastic, which are home brewers. And then they're going to be making gains that no one else has. That this is going to be something where I hope, Brad, we can talk about this in a year or two, and we're like, man, we know so much more, and wet hop beers are so much more prevalent because it's now a new option.
Yeah, there's a handful of commercial craft brewers now that are starting to use wet hops, but as you point out, they're kind of required to order pretty big quantities of hops to really get fresh wet hops off the vine, right?
Right. So it's a big to do in the Pacific Northwest. They've got, during wet hop harvest season, September-ish, every brewery has a wet hop beer on tap, and they've got wet hop brew only competitions, and it's well known there, but it's just going to be nice when it, when we have the ability to proliferate it throughout the U.S.
Yeah. Well, Greg, what are some of the challenges that come from growing in a greenhouse? And also, I think this is you started just a couple of years ago, so I guess the vines are just starting to come into full production, right?
Yeah, so they are. This is actually our second harvest in our existing greenhouse. And so, yeah, they are starting to come into full production, which is exciting. And as Kyle mentioned,
I think it takes about 2 years, right, to get it to get a hop plant productive, right?
It does. It takes about 2 grow cycles. So years is something we can accelerate in a greenhouse, which is kind of cool because we can actually, fake the vernalization or the winter process by putting the plants in a refrigerator and simulating winter for them. So then we don't have to wait the full time for them to go ahead and, all winter to pass. So we can pull them out of the refrigerator, and then go ahead and put them in the buckets and grow them. So we can accelerate some things. So, but yeah, this is our second harvest, and so we're pretty excited about that. As far as some of the challenges that we're running into, there are a lot of them. Like Kyle mentioned, we are the first ones in the country to be doing this off season and offering them commercials. So, we are kind of pioneers, and you know what they say about pioneers. The challenges that we found compared to a traditional grower are a lot. We have a lot of levers to pull, which in a pretty good way is an opportunity. So we can play with Mother Nature, if you will. So for example, if it's really cloudy out, the only thing that a farmer can do is really complain about how many clouds are out there or how long it's been cloudy for. In the greenhouse, we can turn on the lights and, simulate the sun, if you will. If it rains a lot or not too much, the farmer can't do too much in the traditional area, whereas we control the watering source and the timing and everything like that. those type of, if it's hot out, if you have a big heat spell hits the Pacific Northwest or something like that, well, there's not a lot you can do. For us, we turn on the air conditioning. So there's those type of things that really make it advantageous to grow in a greenhouse because we can pull a number of levers. And that's been, that's a super opportunity for us. And we pull the levers with one goal in mind, and that is to deliver a super premium hop. So everything we do is around looking at the quality of the plant and making sure that those hops get what they need, and the quality is top notch.
And you mentioned you produce hops year round. How many cycles can you get in a year using these kinds of techniques?
Yeah, so we get our goal is 3 to 4 cycles in a year, and that's what we're aiming for. But our the far out goal that would be amazing for us is to have a continuous harvest. And what that means is that there's always a plant in bloom in the greenhouse. And that's pretty tricky to do because nobody really knows what causes these plants to flower. It could be the maturity of the plant or the number of nodes that it has. Leaf nodes, kind of the size of the plant. It could be what causes it to flower could be the photoperiod. So as the day gets shorter, it triggers the plant to flower. It could be the very top node, the apical node. As it breaks off or bends down, it releases some hormones that could cause the plant to flower. So that's, we're experimenting with those type of things to see if we can increase the harvest or eventually get to a continuous harvest.
And of course, I assume you probably stagger the planting of the planting and growing of the plants so you can get multiple harvests overlapping over time, right?
Yeah, that's the goal. And it's interesting because we can pull some out of, we simulate winter. I talked a little bit about it, so we can pull them out of the refrigerator at different times to get the staggering. So, and that's something else that we had to learn too was, hey, how do you actually simulate winter for a hop plant?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, how large is the operation at this point? You got to have a few greenhouses, and also I was wondering what kind of varieties are you growing?
Sure. So we've got Cascade, Chinook, Columbus, CTZ, and then Amalia, which is a Neo-Mexicanus strain. And, actually for the listeners who are sitting at their desk or at a stoplight and not being unsafe in driving, take out your phone. And if you go to our Instagram page, which is 24-hour hops, and you can add a space in between those two words, you can see pictures of it. But we've got a greenhouse that's about 3,000 square feet, and it's in Maricopa, Arizona. We have a lease through the University of Arizona, and we've got it set up a couple rows. And
there's a couple pictures there on for those folks coming in on YouTube or video.
Yeah, the visual guys. Yep. So that's where we are now, and probably like some small businesses, you start at the back of your car and then you get a small shop and a bigger shop. So that's where we are now.
So you're leasing, I guess, from the University of Arizona. Are you working with the University of Arizona as well?
So we did originally. So what you would consider like the middle phase of this experiment or this venture. So the first stage was us growing it in the garage. And then the second stage was us working with the University of Arizona down in Tucson. And they were great. They helped us out. What Greg said is true. It's crazy because a lot of people know a lot about hops, but it's all about how hops act in an outdoor environment. So when he said that we don't really know what triggers flowering, that's because no one's bothered to run the experiments to isolate the variables, because nobody's had the ability to do so or the need to, because they're all just going to happen at once. And for an outdoor farmer, you get what you get. So we worked with the University of Arizona and they got us a great start. But again, a lot of the times we'd ask questions, so like the vernalization, that's a technique borrowed from tulips. They do that for tulips. So we'd ask questions about hops and they'd say, we don't know yet. We don't know yet. And so they collaborated with us and we funded a study for them for about the first year. And they did all these experiments. And then we kind of took what they had and we said, okay, we think we're at a place where we can start working on this ourselves. And then we moved to lease only, which is what we have now.
So, Greg, you guys are also using hydroponics to aid in growing the hops. Can you tell us a little bit about hydroponics and what that is?
Sure. Hydroponics is basically when you grow without soil. So we don't have any soil in the greenhouse that the plants are in, and where your nutrients are delivered in a water-soluble solution. So that's pretty much what hydroponics is. And we're big fans of hydroponics because it allows us to do some things that are super important and super healthy for the plants. And what we do is we change out the nutrients every single day. So not 7 days, not 10 days. Each day the plants get a brand new set of nutrients. It'd be like, imagine if every morning you got up and in front of you was a complete buffet of everything that you needed. And in that buffet, you know, you had your eggs and your toast and your meats and your salads and fruits and vegetables and, nuts and everything that you needed to be productive that day was there. Oh, and of course you want to have your desserts in there too. So that's what we do. So we take, with the hydroponics, we're able to take the solution out every day and give the plants what they need, when they need it, to help them grow the best that they possibly can.
So they're actually growing without soil? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. The medium, we have an inert medium. We use Hydroton, which is these little clay balls, if you will, that the plant sits in, and we put the nutrient solution in on the top, and it goes through and does a recirculating system, is the type of system we have set up. And then so what happens is the nutrients in the water solution are stored in these big tanks, and that's what we change out every day and put brand new nutrients in, so that every day they get the new stuff, and they're just in this inert substance, these like clay balls that are probably a little bit bigger than a marble.
That's pretty amazing. And you're able to control. So, I mean, bottom line is you can control just about everything. You're controlling the temperature, you're controlling the light, you're controlling the nutrients that they get every day, right?
Right. Exactly. So it is. We have a lot of dials and levers that we can pull, and so we can control almost everything. It's kind of a challenge being Mother Nature.
So then that brings up the obvious question: how do you know which one's to pull?
Yeah, that's the experiment, and that's the experience that we've got and working with it. The plant is also pretty cool because it'll give you signs. You know, you can see the growth and measure the growth and the leaves, the color of the leaves. It kind of talks to you in a way that allows you to figure out what to do. But it is a learning experience, and that's where a lot of the challenge does come in. Especially since I think you mentioned you don't have a background necessarily in farming, right? Or do you? Right. No, I don't. It's I'm more from the technical industry, so yeah, not a big background in farming. But like Kyle said, we do reach out to a number of people, and we do have the University of Arizona is pretty nice, and we can go in there and consult with them, and they do give us some time, even though we are leasing from them. So yeah, so it's been quite the learning experience. Nice. Well, can you walk us through the typical hop life cycle? What does it look like? I assume you buy rhizomes to start with, right? Yeah, you can start with a rhizome, or you can start. We actually started with plantlets, so we did do that, which was good. And what happens is a hop's a pretty amazing plant, and so let's say you do start with a rhizome. In the spring, it'll start to grow because the hop plant is actually perennial underground and annual above ground. So perennial underground means the roots stay healthy year after year, like we talked about, but the plant on the top will actually die every year. So at the end of summer, that plant's done and it basically dies, but the root system keeps on living. So in the very beginning, what happens is in the spring, this rhizome comes out. We call it spring regrowth, and it shoots up these bull shoots, which are its way to establish itself in the environment. So it comes out and says, spring's here. I better make sure I get my fair share of sunshine. And it has this very fast-growing shoot called a bull shoot. We chop that down because it doesn't really have high-quality hop cones, and the yield's pretty small. So then what we do is we wait. Once those are chopped down, the next set of growth coming in is what we actually train, and that's the vegetative. That's what we call the vegetative growth. That vegetative growth takes off pretty quick also. And what we'll do is drop down a twine, if you will, and train it so that it can climb up. In the Pacific Northwest, they have the trellises are about 18 feet. So this hop plant, when it starts growing, grows about 6 to 8 inches a day and really takes off and grows up this twine up to about 18 feet in the Pacific Northwest. We don't have, our greenhouse isn't that tall. So what we have to do is take a technique from the tomato farmers and basically do a lean and lower. So they're growing up on a twine, on a bobbin, and we drop the bobbin, release some rope from the bobbin, if you will, the twine from the bobbin, and then move it to another trellis. So that's kind of, think of it as almost growing at an angle. Yeah, there's a good picture of that.
There's a picture of it, yeah, so interesting. So you're able to get them going over at an angle, I guess, and then where do you go from there?
Okay, so that's the vegetative growth. Then the next cycle is what we call the reproductive growth. And so if you think of these hop plants, during that cycle of rapid growth, they're just really growing high, right? And they're really thin, and they aren't very wide at all. Then when it hits the reproductive growth, there's a signal that says, okay, make these side arms. And all of a sudden, this thing starts bushing out a lot, and you see a lot of these wide side arms, and that's where the hop cones are, is on these side arms. And, they start off as these little burrs, if you will, and then within about 5 weeks, they turn right into a hop cone, a fully mature hop cone. And then, so that's the reproductive cycle. And then the final cycle is during this time, when the hops are mature, they start preparing for dormancy for the winter. So what they'll actually do for the dormancy is they will start taking all their the starches that they created through photosynthesis and put those into their roots in the form of sugars to get ready to last the winter and come out strong in the spring. So that's the life cycle. Pretty amazing plants. They grow fast, and they're quite interesting.
Must be pretty exciting to watch them grow like 6 inches a day, right?
It is, and it's a lot of work then too, because as they grow, we're constantly moving them down the line, like you pointed out. So that's a lot of work, but yeah, they can take off.
Wow. It does sound intensive too. I mean, you got a fair amount of labor going into this, right?
Yeah. So we do. Right now it's pretty labor intensive, keeping those things going and understanding, how to get them to get up to a height where they can produce a lot of the cones. Hopefully in the future we'll use dwarf plants. So we'll see how that goes.
What's the advantage of a dwarf plant?
They don't grow as tall, so you can put them easier in a greenhouse. So they grow 8 feet and have similar yields. And they're still developing them, so they aren't quite out yet. But they'd have similar yields to those in the field that are up to 10 feet and are up to 18 feet. What they do, though, is they have cones along the whole section. So from the very bottom, like a lot of our hop plants, the cones start at about 4 feet up. So we lose that 4 feet of yield, if you will.
And it takes 2 cycles to get to full production, right? Why is that? Why does it take so long to get the hop into production?
So I think it's just the maturity of the root structure and of the plant. So it's, as the plant establishes itself more and the root structure gets hardier and has more sugars and starches in it, and then it can just go ahead and produce more and yield more. So it's mainly linked to plant maturity.
So then you're going to harvest the cones. And Kyle, how do you manage to package those and actually deliver them? I think wet hops have to be delivered pretty quickly, right?
Yep, they do. It's easy for us, though. We're always at the greenhouse, and we're talking about small batch quantities. So what we do is we'll hand pick and inspect the cones, and then what we do is we put them in a bag. We get the air out of them, and then we wrap them in insulation, include a freezer pack, and then package them securely in a nice box. So there's a USPS a couple miles from our greenhouse, and I think we say on our website, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but like 6 hours maybe from picking to shipping, but I don't think we've ever been over 2 or 3. So they're insanely fresh. And when you package them like that, you create kind of an ideal environment for preserving them, which is a cool, dark place. So
And you did you say you keep them cool as well?
Yeah, we have a freezer pack. So we include, like for when you hurt yourself or you want to keep your lunch cold all day. So we include one of those in each box. And that whole process is kicked off by the customer going to 24hourhops.com. And what they do is they can pick the ship date. So they say, I want 8 ounces of Cascade shipped on, let's say Thursday, and they want it to arrive on Friday for their brew on Saturday. And so we look at our work orders in the morning and we say, okay, we got to pick, 3-4 pounds going to these different places. And then the user picks their shipping rate, and then, within a few hours, it's in the mail.
And what's the typical shelf life for wet hops? I know it's very short, right?
Sure. I mean, we've been doing some empirical studies, right, just through observation, and they're holding up pretty well in, again, cool, dark places. So we haven't seen any obvious visual degradation, but if you get the hops, we've had some pretty high level home brewers and commercial brewers choose 2-day shipping, and then so they had us pick on Wednesday. And they got out on Saturday, or they went to brew on Saturday, and they're like, these things are incredibly fresh. And a few of them had actually been to Yakima, and they're like, these are just as fresh as I've ever seen. So, as long as it has the resins, the oils, and all that tasty lupulin, I think you get a good beer out of it.
So, I mean, the goal is obviously to get something that's almost right off the vine, right?
Yep, that's it. I mean, it's insanely fresh, I mean, think about it's a plant, right? So your produce from a grocery store, same thing. It's like it's best right when it's picked, and obviously you can have a couple days to use it, and you won't be able to tell a difference.
So I mean, is this something you'd use primarily for aroma hops or boil hops or both, or? Yeah,
so so you can do whatever you want, right? Again, we think it's a new brewing method. And we're excited to see where it goes. For the first time brewer with wet hops or the lemon, we recommend using it as a dry hopping or whirlpooling, just because you get a ton of aroma. And that's the whole beauty of using fresh ingredients is there's resins and oils that aren't stamped out or disturbed during that. It's kind of a physically abusive process and a chemically or temperature-wise energy abusive process to dry a hop. And so you get really fresh ingredients, and that complexity shows up in your beer. So for those who are considering this, and we hope you do, it's pretty easy to use wet hops. You could use it just like leaves, whole leaves. So you can steep it with a mesh bag. You can put some sanitized marbles in there to sink it down on the cold side, and we recommend 3 to 5x. So there's water weight in the fresh ingredients. So much like
one of the things I want to ask you is can you contrast the process, or walk us quickly maybe through the process used to dry hops that we typically go buy pellet hops or something that have been dried and then compressed versus what you're talking about with wet hops, and then we maybe talk about the moisture content as well.
Sure. So the process, you're saying the process of how the hops are treated between.
Well, how they're typically dry. I mean, typically they're dried, right? So they go through a process. I mean, you obviously serving them fresh, so you're picking them right off the vine and sending them right to the brewer, right? But walk us through what you would get from for a packaged hop, maybe a pelletized hop, just at a very high level versus what you're offering.
Yeah, of course. I'm not 100% familiar with that process, but basically it involves intense heat because you're firing and drying them, and then you're compacting them. So you can just imagine taking your food and putting it over a massive flame, an oven, and then smashing them up to compact them. And then there is losses during that process. And that's exactly why it tastes a little different, and in my mind, a little better when you're using fresh ingredients.
And then also typically traditional hops are only harvested once a year, right?
Yeah, that was it. That's why we're here is we thought that was a wrong that needed to be righted. Why have fresh ingredient? Like I said in the beginning, right? You get fresh ingredients. You can have fresh oranges year round and apples. Why not fresh hops year round? So no more waiting. If you're a home brewer and you're trying to perfect your recipe and it takes a couple times, well, that would mean a couple years. But now it can be done successively. So we think it's a good thing, an exciting thing for homebrewers.
Okay, let's talk about now the weight issue. Obviously, because you're not drying the hops, you've got a lot of moisture content that's not there in regular hops, so you end up having to use quite a bit more hops to get the same effect, right?
Yep. Same, but slightly different because, again, you're getting the resins and oils. So we recommend 3 to 5x. So if you were going to do 1 ounce of pellets, you would do 3 to 5 ounces of wet hops. Again, these brewers, this is going to be the first. So we have a harvest coming up mid-January. Mm-hmm. We're really excited about that. And that will be the first time anybody's that we're aware of has sold wet hops during the off season. And so when we give ranges like 3 to 5x, in a year or two, I think we're not going to be given such a wide range, and we're going to have feedback, and the homebrewers that participate in the January harvest and the subsequent harvests are going to have a chance to set the tone with how to perfect these wet hop recipes. But as it sits now, take your 3 to 5 ounces or 3 to 5x ounces of wet hops. You can put it in a whirlpool. You can put it in just a strainer bag, like a stocking. You can sink it down with some sanitized marbles and let it seep and let the aroma be extracted.
So I assume you get a lot more fresh flavor out of that. You get some of the vegetal material too, right? You get some of the vegetal flavors that you don't have from the hops that have been compressed and then maybe sat around for 6 months, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, the best way to describe it right now is just how complex and fresh it tastes. I mean, you just smell it and you're like, wow, that is like a plant, it really is a treat. To me, hops has always been the traditional beer taste. Like when I smell a hop cone, I think of an IPA. And when I smell an IPA, I think of a hop cone.
Yeah. And Brad, you mentioned the aroma, and yeah, it really does amp up the aroma. And research has shown that 70% of what you interpret as flavor comes from aroma. If you ever had a really bad cold, how things taste terrible, that's they just don't taste. And that's because of how much you get from your sensory. And also, on a good beer, you want to drink it out of a glass, not out of a bottle, so you can get that aroma flavor. So that's really, these hop cones really, like Kyle said, do have an amazing aroma.
And Greg, one of the interesting things I think is that you guys are primarily focused on homebrewers, although I'm sure you'd offer to the craft brewing market as well. But what are some of the advantages for homebrewers using a technique like this?
Yeah, so Kyle kind of hit upon it pretty quickly. Is in the traditional model, most homebrewers really couldn't get the hops. Because one, they had to order in very large quantities, usually a minimum of 20 pounds, if they could even get those, and they can only do it once a year at the grower's schedule. So we took that model and turned it on its head, and turned it on its ear, or turned it on its head. And basically, what we do is we allow small batches, so a minimum of 4 ounces, and they pick the ship day, so they know when they're going to get the hops. So, we thought that was a pretty exciting opportunity for us to really engage with homebrewers because, talking with the homebrewers, and at the end of the day, homebrewers they like to experiment. A lot of times they're on, the forefront of new brewing capabilities and new flavors and stuff like that. And so it just seemed natural to want to deal with the homebrewers and provide them this opportunity. Plus, they're a fun group of people. I really enjoy working with them.
They're kind of scary, yeah.
Right. Present company excluded, of course.
Yeah. Well, what are some of the things you've learned? Have you guys made some test batches of beer? I just wanted to jump into that before we talk a little more about growing. Have you made some beer with wet hops?
Yeah, both from, we've had some commercial brewers actually in Arizona and Phoenix brew batches entirely from wet hops, for our wet hops, and also they kind of did the whirlpool aspect. So different brewers, said I'm going to use only wet hops, and other brewers did the dry hopping. And we had a number of home brewers on our first batch brew, and they're super fantastic even on our first grow. So that was really encouraging for us. The commercial ones sold out very quickly on their, wet hop offerings, and the home brewers really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, what are some of the things you learned, Greg, last couple of years about growing hops since you started from scratch here?
So, I've learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes. So whenever you're the first time at doing something, you definitely have a lot of learnings from all the mistakes that you make, because there's really no experts to consult, as we talked about. A couple of things is, one, you really got to enjoy the process of learning. So I'd get pretty frustrated and say, oh my God, this isn't working, and I'm just not making much progress. Did
you ruin anything along the way?
Oh yeah.
I always destroy things.
Yeah, I've had to re-scrap the whole circulation system. I've killed plants, taken them out of the refrigerator too early, too late, too cold, too hot. You name it, I've done it. I've chopped them down at the wrong times. It's not real pretty, but it's been a great learning experience. I'm a lot smarter now than I was 4 months ago. And also I'm starting to develop a little bit of patience, because no matter what, the plant's going to do what the plant's going to do. So there's only so much you can do to help it along. And then after that, it's just got to do it on its own. So I'm enjoying the journey of all the learning. So that's been good. That's been a learning experience for me, is how to enjoy all the learning and working on the patience aspect.
That's awesome. Well, Kyle, I wanted to ask where you can learn more about your products and also working with wet hops.
Sure. So we encourage everyone to go to 24hourhops.com. We've got a grow coming up in mid-January, and right now, today, you guys can go on to that website. Hopefully they aren't all sold out by the time this airs live, but you can pick the type of hop. So again, Columbus CTZ, Cascade, Chinook, or Amalia, which is a strain of Neo-Mexicanus. And you can pick the quantity and the ship date, and you can reserve it right there. If by the time you guys get there, it's all sold out, there's a box to put your email address in, and we send out one email a month, and we keep it short, we keep it informative, and we don't spam you. But those guys get the first access to the hop. So when we have a harvest coming up, we always let our core group know, and they get a chance to reserve the hops first. And then we announce it on Instagram. So that's the next place you guys can go, is Instagram or Facebook. Search for us, 24 Hour Hops. You can put a space in between those two words, and it will pop right up. Awareness, just come and hang out with us. We'll put some tasty hops in your news feeds and your Instagram feeds. We have a little fun along the way, and we'd love for you guys to join us, because, hey, this is an emerging brewing technique, and it's a great way to differentiate a beer.
Yeah, I was looking at the site. You've got I'm pulling it up right here. You've got a calendar. You can actually pick when you get them, right?
Yeah, you bet.
And the price looks fairly reasonable too. I think was it $3.99? Is that right?
That's right. You got it. Yep. We work hard to keep that price down.
I bet you do. It's probably not cheap to do all this.
Labor of love.
That's pretty cool. So you can you basically just pick your date, tell them how much hops you want, and you'll have it shipped. You can pick the ship date, right?
Yeah, cool. And then we always encourage the brewers to stay part. This is kind of a family. There's a family aspect to it. So we encourage the home brewers to stay connected. So after you do your brew, if you'd like, we would love to have you send us your recipe. We'll host it on the site. You can tell us if you'd want us to we can give you credit by name or by a handle or a tag name, and then let us know what you learned. And we'd be very proud to be part of that process, and very grateful to go along with you guys. I mean, the commercial brewers had great success brewing with our stuff, and then the home brewers, we had a lot of guys in Arizona locally this last grow come and bring us our beer, and they were proud of it, and for good reason.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, we forget, obviously you're experimenting with growing the hops, but wet hops themselves are fairly new brewing technique, really.
Exactly. If you're not in the Pacific Northwest, this is a fun frontier to experiment in and try out different things. So, yeah, we definitely encourage everybody. Please go to the website, check it out. You can shoot us. We're actually implementing a chat feature that should be up certainly by the time this thing airs, so you can talk to us in real time, ask us questions, and we'll get you guys going. And you guys can be part of this. Our motto on the website, and you can see behind me, join the wet revolution. So we really think it's a cool thing that's going on here.
Nice. Greg, I wanted to get your closing thoughts before we go. And also, if I missed anything, you're welcome to jump in and mention it here.
No, thanks. I think we pretty much covered it all. And, the one I really encourage the homebrewers to get in and experience the Aroma, and that it's really not that difficult. I know we talked about a new technique, but it's not that daunting. It's easy to do it. You really don't have to. You can just do a straight substitution of, like Kyle mentioned, 3 to 5 for times what you want to do. So if you're going to dry hop with an ounce of pellets, just dry hop with 4 to 5 ounces of wet hops, and you get an amazing experience. So we're really super excited. We want to encourage brewers, home brewers, to try it out and let us know how it turns out. We'll be interested.
Nice. Kyle, I wanted to get your closing thoughts.
I think we covered it, and it's always fun to see you guys on Instagram. So we got the website plug. Instagram is 24-hour hops with spaces in between. Friend us and join us on the journey. Thank you, Brad, for having us.
My pleasure. And again, your website is 24, the number 24, hourhops.com. And there it is right there. And I appreciate you guys coming on the show. Thank you very much for being here, Greg. Really nice to have you.
Thanks. Enjoyed it.
And Kyle, good to have you as well.
Oh, geez, it was an honor.
So my guests today, again, were Kyle and Greg Stelzer from 24 Hour Hops at 24hourhops.com. Great to have you guys. Thanks again.
Bye.
Well, a big thank you to Kyle and Greg Stelzer for joining me this week. Thanks also to our sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They have a new Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine podcast, which I encourage you to check out. It features some of the top craft brewery owners and brewmasters discussing brewing techniques and flavors in beer. It's the podcast for those who make and drink great beer. You can find it on iTunes or at beerandbrewing.com/podcasts. And also Blickman Engineering, creators of the Riptide Pump. Designed for home brewers, this pump features a whispered, quiet sealed housing, a removable tri-clamp stainless steel head that's very easy to clean, and a built-in relief valve for easy priming. Get the Riptide Pump today, another great innovation from BlickmanEngineering.com. And BeerSmith 3 is now available for both desktop and mobile platforms. BeerSmith 3 adds mead, wine, and cider support, new Whirlpool hop options, support for high-altitude brewing, and a whole lot more. Check out BeerSmith 3 software and get your free 21-day trial today from BeerSmith.com. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great brewing week.